There are times of our life, there are times in our church where we have to navigate through troubled waters. What happens when we're caught in the midst of those storms? What happens when the waves come crashing on us? When it seems that the destination that we're going to is never going to get there? What happens when we think we're doing everything right and then we're getting blown off course? And I can't begin to wonder and think about the exact same thing as we're going through the book of Acts chapter 27. Christ tells Paul that he was a good and faithful servant in Jerusalem, but now he must be a witness to him in Rome. And so he gets on the boat because he requests his appearance before Caesar. And because Caesar is in Rome, they need to now move him from his place into Rome. And so they think, okay, we got to get to Rome. And the way they do that is order by sea. So I want to bring up, there's a picture of this map. Hopefully up on the screen you'll be able to see it, all right? Oh, let's go to the next one. We're going to see where they're going to go from. Caesarea is where kind of basically where they started from. But because of the storms and the dangerous waters, they couldn't go from Caesarea all the way to Malta. They couldn't go to the direct route. They had to guard them by Cyprus and up to Myra, Cnidus, and back around. They had to take shelter from the storm by land. And so many times in our life, we're trying to navigate through troubled waters. We make difficult decisions like we learned last week, and maybe we can't go the course that we want to go to, the path in which we seek. But we're still trying to get to that final destination. So we're picking ourselves up somewhere past Crete. And we're going to find ourselves somewhere in the midst of the ocean. When the storms in our life start crashing in on us, and we figure out how are we going to get to our destination. Not only is our journey important to know, but I think it's also important, as you saw in that first graphic, that we know a little bit about the ship. Sometimes we got to know about the equipment we're using and on how it's going to sustain ourselves through the storms of life. And as we study this passage, it's going to be referenced different parts of the ship. Start talking about the stern or the starboard side or the port side. I always figure out what in the world are they talking about. I'm not the sea lady kind of person. I like to have myself our own firm plank. Not that I mind going on a boat, but the front of the boat is called the bow. The right side of the boat is the starboard side. The other side is the port side. And right behind you is the stern. We'll take some of that information to understand more personally what it means when we're talking about this passage as they're giving these terms of the boats here in Acts chapter 27. Last week we learned that in order to navigate through troubled waters, we have to make tough decisions. As we continue and finish this passage in this chapter of Acts 27, we realize that when we navigate through troubled waters, not only should we be making the tough decisions, but just as importantly, we need to keep the courage. Keep the courage. And that becomes difficult to do. Because there are times in our life when the waves come crashing in, when we literally start seeing the boat fall apart. We just want to give up. And we want to abandon ship. Our church is no different. Churches are no different. Look around us today. There are people that were a part of this ship just a few years ago. And for the lack of better terms, for one reason or the other, abandoned ship. Church, we need to keep the courage. I know it's not easy, but there are going to be 3 reasons why we can keep the courage, and we need to keep the courage. And we're going to uncover those as we read Acts chapter 27, verses 21 through 44. Before I begin reading from Scripture, let us go to the Lord in prayer. We allow Him to be the front of our mind. Allow Him to speak to us. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we hold your word in our hands, I pray we tune our ears to your voice. As we hold your word in your hands, and we read these words with our eyes, I pray that you open up our heart to truth. And allow your word to speak to us, to change our lives, to change this church, to impact this community. For in you our faith is placed. For in you we have hope. And as we understand this morning that even though the storms of life are pouring down upon us, it is tossing us about. And as so much as we want to abandon ship, Lord, I pray that we understand that we still have purpose. And that you are still in control. Father, let your word speak to us. Pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, to whom I pray. Amen. Here's what Luke writes in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 27, beginning in verse 21. When they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you have ought to have followed my advice, and not to have set sail from Crete, and incurred this damage and loss. Yet now I urge you to keep your courage. For there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong and to whom I stood before me, to whom I serve, stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. Therefore, keep your courage, men. For I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. But when the 14th night came, as we were being driven out in the Adriatic Sea, there about midnight the sailors began to surmise that they might be approaching some island. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms, and a little further on they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. Fearing that we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and wished for daybreak. But as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship, and they laid down the ship's boat from the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, Today is the 14th day to which you've been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is your preservation. For not a hair from the head of any of you will perish. And having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. All of them were encouraged, and they themselves also took food. All of us in the ship were 276 persons. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. When day came, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a bay with a beach, and they resolved to drive the ship onto it if they could. And casting off the anchors, They left them into the sea, while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders and hoisting the foresail to the wind. They were heading for the beach. But striking a reef where the two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow struck fast and remained immovable, but the stern began to be broken up by the forces of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, so that none of them would swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention, and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land, and the rest should follow, some on planks, and some on others, and others on various things from the ship. And so it happened that they were all brought safely to land. Church, even though we are navigating through troubled waters, I need to remind us to keep the courage. I love what Paul begins here in verse 21 of Acts chapter 17. When they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you ought to have followed my advice and not to have set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. Okay? In other words, what he's saying is, you kind of got to put in a bad position because you didn't listen to me. However, even though we are in a dangerous and difficult position, and some others might say we are in grave peril, listen to these words. And church, I think we need to hear these words this morning. I urge you now to keep the courage, for there will no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all these who are sailing with you. Therefore keep up your courage, men. For I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. Church, we need to make sure we keep courage, for our faith is in God. Let me say this again. We need to keep courage, church, for our faith is in God. If your faith is in man, go ahead. You might be a little scared. If our faith is in the boat, go ahead and be a little, because you hear the creaks of the boat, and you hear the waves come crashing on, and you think to yourself, how can we survive? The answer is we can't, not with the boat in which we are in, and not with people making the decisions, ignoring common logic. However, we can keep courage, because my faith is in God. Keep courage, for our faith is in God. And I say that statement and ask us to keep our courage because our faith is in God. And I ask this question: what does it mean when we say that we have faith in God? Think about this. When you're talking with the world and they're asking you, how can you have a smile on your face? Look around us. There's so much danger and toil in this world. How can you live with confidence? How can you live without fear? And your answer is, well, I have faith in God. And their answer is, and their next question becomes, what do you mean you have faith in God? As we are in the midst of our storms, are we in the midst of the waves come crashing on us? What does it mean that we have faith in God? It means that I believe God is personal. I believe in a God that is personal, that He hears my cries, versus 21 through 24 explain these things. Specifically in verse 23, for this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong. Think about this. I belong to God. That means you are part of Him. He's not just something out there. He is something to whom we are with. I belong to God. I, again, think of sports analogies, and I think I am part of His team. I have been chosen by God. I have been hand-picked by God. And think about how this implies when it comes to Paul. Paul was on the road to Damascus to injure men of God, to put them into prison, and in some cases to kill Christians. When God stopped him in the midst of his journey and came to him and says, "You are now my messenger." God chose him in an exact same way in our own lives. Although they are different journeys, they tell the exact same story. God knocked on your door. He says, "I want you. I want you. You can belong to me." God is personal. Not only does we belong to him, but as he continues to say, "For this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong and to whom I serve stood before me, saying, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sealing with you.'" You see, not only is we belong to God, but we serve him. And in our service to him, we recognize something. Did you catch it in verse 24? God spoke to him. You know what does that mean? Because God is personal, he interacts with his people. He's not just a maker and he just sends you off your way and now we are robots not having any connection with our Creator. Instead, we have an unending relationship with our Creator. A desirable relationship with our Creator. A longing relationship for our Creator. Insomuch that when we abandon our first love towards him, he longs to get us back. He yearns and is pained when we leave him. He is the father of the prodigal son, waiting and earnestly looking for us to return. Look what it says. God spoke to me. The angel of the Lord spoke to me, saying, "Do not be afraid, for you must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who are with you, sailing with you." He has granted you all those who are sailing with you. God's still involved in your midst. God is still impacting your life. Even though at the moment we see these storms come crashing in and we hear the boat starting to break apart and we can't think of how we're going to survive, we have to be reminded every once in a while that God is still here. Verse 25. "Therefore, keep your courage." Every once in a while, I think of this moment of just Paul slapping the guys. "Keep your courage, men. Snap out of it. Don't worry." Because not only do I believe that God is personal, but I also believe that God is a promise keeper. Here's what it says. "Keep your courage, men, for I believe, God, that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. Therefore, I keep up your courage, men, for I believe God." Think about that statement. That is a very powerful statement that Paul makes to the entire ship. It's a very simple statement into the question that I ask you. Do we believe? Do I believe God? Even in the midst of the storm, even when no one else will believe, when everybody else has abandoned, when everybody else has gone away, when the storms in life seem too much for us, do we believe God? Paul says with an unashamedly says, I believe. I believe that it will turn out exactly as it has been told. You know, there's something about God. His promises do come true. Amen. When he says it will happen, it will happen. God keeps his promises. And you know what about the believer if he keeps the promise he makes? So those that are in my hand, no one will be able to snatch them away. Mm-hmm. No matter how difficult it may seem. No matter how easy it would be for us to just be thrown away by the waves of the world. We belong to him. We're in his palm. Those two things is what I mean, what we say when we have a picking up, but there's one more thing. Verse 27. On the 14th night, as we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And forgive me, I forgot to see how many feet are in a fathom, but the fathoms are the amount of depth there is. That's how they measure how far it is from the bottom of the boat to any sort of ground. All right? They're taking a check to see how close they are from ground. They found out, they took some sounding, they were 20 fathoms. They went a little further, and here they come across the intercom. We are at 15 fathoms, sir. And they keep coming across, and they're realizing that things aren't going well because they're going to run aground, and if that happens, it's not going to go well. So fearing that we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast out 4 anchors from the stern. If you remember back on that image, that stern is the back of the boat. They dropped down 4 anchors on the back of the boat, thinking that would help them. Look what it says. As the sailors were trying to escape from the ship, they had let down the ship's boat. Here's what we want to understand. Now I'm trying to understand what all this looks like. You got a ship, it's a big boat. They're going to now drop down a little smaller boat. Lifeboat, exactly right. And what the intention of this lifeboat is they were wanting to try to do, on the pretense of intending to lay out the anchors from the bow. So they were trying to, they let down the anchors in the back. Now they were trying to go, in order to get the anchors from the front, they had to lower down a smaller boat to get to the anchors in the front boat. But listen to what it says. Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Church, when we say we believe in God, not only do we believe that he is personal, not only do we believe that he's a promise keeper, but we believe that he is a protector. But you have to understand this one point. In order to be protected by God, we must seek shelter in him. So many times we get out of his ship and get our own little lifeboat and thinking we can survive the storms on our own. God says he will protect us. All we need to do is stay in his shelter. Stay under his protection. Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. And this next verse is probably the greatest act of faith that they did. The soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. The moment in which you let go of your pride and you let go of what you are in control of and let God take charge, is the moment we realize that, you know what, God, you are in control. I can't go anywhere now. And so many of us hold on to those things. Hold on to that little life raft just in case we truly don't believe God. It's time to cut away the lifeboat, church. It's time to let go of what we are trying to hold on to in order for us to seek safely in case that God doesn't deliver on His promise. Now is the time to let go of those things and truly keep the courage and place our faith in God. Then look what happens. We can keep the courage not only because our faith in God, but we can keep the courage because we are in this together. Here's what it says, verse 33. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you've been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore, I encourage you to take some food, for this is your preservation, for not a hair from the head of any of you will perish. Having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and he began to eat. All of them were encouraged. They themselves also took food. All of us in the ship were 200.